In this video, we're going to dive into exactly how to craft the perfect webinar registration page so you attract the right kind of attendees who are ready to not only pay attention to the information you have to provide to them, but also they're ready, willing, and able to buy your products and services that you'll inevitably be selling on your webinar. So let's dive in. So there are three core elements or key components of a webinar registration landing page. The first is communicate the benefit, the second is to introduce the presenter, and the third is to enroll the viewer. Now you can add on to this, but when it comes to web page design, specifically landing pages and registration pages, you want to keep things as simple and streamlined as possible. And part of why we need these three key elements is because we don't just want a bunch of random people showing up to our webinar. We need people who are already ready and on board with what you have to offer and who you are as a presenter. So that's what kind of ties into making sure we communicate our benefit up front, we introduce who we are, or introduce who the presenter is if you're co-presenting with somebody else, and then further enroll them to make sure that this is in fact a good opportunity for them. And the reason this is so important, and the reason you really want to get this right up front and test this, is because you want your webinar conversion metrics on the back end to make sense. If you have a landing page that just captures any and everyone who might be interested in what you have to offer, you're going to have very low conversion rates on your webinar. And if you're testing your webinar and doing what you normally do to make sure your webinar is optimized for sales, you're going to make a lot of adjustments, adjusting for an audience that isn't perfect for or isn't good for what you want to offer. So to break that down into layman's terms, because it's a bit wordy, you want to make sure you only have the perfect prospect coming to your webinar. That way, when you look at your webinar stats, you're looking at good data. If you just let anyone and everyone come in, you're going to spend a tremendous amount of time pulling your hair out trying to fix your webinar, when really you just need to fix the audience that's coming to the webinar. So hopefully that kind of shows why this is so important, and it will save you, because it's a lot easier to edit a web page than it is to change your webinar, because then you have to re-record, you have to redo slides, you have to re-upload if it's an automated webinar, you have to learn a new script if you still do them live. So let's dive into the three key elements now. Hopefully that explained why this is so important. So number one is communicate the benefits. And so the question that the viewer is asking is, what's so special about this webinar? Because as much as we like to think our webinar is cool and the greatest, there are a lot of other webinars out there. A lot of other people use webinars, they use sales pages and sales letters. So you're competing with everybody else. So you have to quickly provide a clear communication of the value you're going to deliver on that webinar. So you want to be clear on what the webinar is covering, like what are they getting? But you can be vague on the how. And then of course you need the date and time. So I've included two examples here. The first one we have here is from Frank Kern, the advanced tactics for absolute market domination. So notice he said, he's telling us what it is. What are they? They're advanced tactics for dominating a market. But he didn't really say how. So a how headline might look like advanced tactics for absolute market domination using Facebook and Google AdWords. Well, that's kind of describing the how. And as soon as you start going into the how in your headlines or your bullet points, you actually create the opportunity for objections. And then it kind of loses the intrigue. Because when you're providing your information, you want there to be a level of, for the viewer, you want the viewer to go, that sounds pretty good. Like, I want to dominate my market. But if you added with Google or Facebook, if they've tried either of those before, even if they've done it completely wrong, even if you have a brand new way to do it, and I'm sure he does, he's instantly going to be thrown into the category of, I tried Google Ads and it didn't really work, so this is kind of useless to me, right? So you don't want to, so there's you don't want to be too specific because you're going to unknowingly or unwittingly pretty much put yourself in a category with something they may have tried in the past. And the next one we have free live training. And I also like using the words free or live. Now, if your webinar is not live, don't put live, because you're really going to hurt your brand and you're just going to piss people off. Like, people are starting to understand what the automated softwares look like. There's only so many of them. So if it's not live, don't put live. You can just put free training or groundbreaking training. And then how to 10x your sales ability without being awkward or pushy. And of course, we're going to go into what's kind of special about this one on the next slide. So when you're creating your headline, we're going to explain the benefit and then remove the friction. So for example, we have one from Neil Patel here, how to generate 195,013 visitors a month without spending $1 on ads. So he's starting with the how-to formula, and a lot of people use this. It's better to use something that's tried and proven than going with something kind of way outside of the box. And I just realized I misspelled worth. Worth your time. Why is this worth your time? So we're answering the question, why is this worth their time in the headlines, not worth? So in Neil's headline, he's telling them exactly, he's going to show them how to generate X amount of visitors, and then he's removing friction by saying without spending $1 on ads, because a big objection will be, okay, well, that's great, but you probably spent a lot of money to get those followers. So he's taking on an objection that a visitor is most likely going to have. And now that he's handled that objection up front, visitors are more likely to opt in. Now, obviously, there are going to be a ton of other objections. So you want to focus on the most common one or the biggest one that might hold people back from showing up to your webinar and learning what you have to do. Now, I included this bottom one here from Samcart, and if you're ever looking for shopping cart software, definitely want to check out samcart.com. No affiliate links here or anything, just an open endorsement because it is by far the best and simplest independent shopping cart out there. It's just great. So anyway, they have how to turn a $20 ad spend into $230 in sales. And why I really liked this particular headline was because, number one, it didn't use the typical copywriting formulas that you normally see, like how to, or the new way, or advanced this, or secret that type thing. But it's still keeping those two key steps, which is explain the benefit and remove the friction. And they're removing the friction actually first. They're saying how to turn a $20 ad spend into $230 in sales. What's really neat about this is by them saying $20, they're removing the same objection that Neil is removing when he says without spending $1 on ads, which is essentially the objection of, I don't have a ton of money to spend on ads. And moving on to the sentence, into $230 in sales. So they're being very specific in terms of, here's what the benefit is. Now, obviously, price points and ad spends are going to be different, right? So someone's not going to necessarily spend $20 and make $230 if they're selling a $1,000 product. But the math works out to where it's communicating, hey, you can spend a very small amount of money and get a large return. So that kind of answers, is it worth your time? So that's step one, which is communicating your benefits, and that's done through your attention grabbing headline, where you clearly explain the what and the benefit that they're getting, being vague on how exactly it's done, and then removing friction. The next one part of the page you want to address is introducing the presenter. Because most times, unless you're doing an email drop or you're doing like a joint promotion where you're doing a webinar with somebody else on someone else's list, then you kind of have to introduce who you are, because they don't know who you are. So be going after the headline. The next part is pretty much saying, hey, this is who's doing it, and this is why you should listen to me. And so hence the question you want to answer with this is, who are you? and why should I care? Now I've got a couple examples here. The first one up top is from Mike Dillard, where he just took a giant, so you do want a photo of yourself. So he just took a picture, it looks like, of him in his kitchen or his living room, and just blew it up and put his headline, and then the next section, the third section, which we'll get to after this. And it's just simple. It's really simple and straightforward. He's got his headline, he's got his bullet points, register today, here's who he is. He happens to use this type of one based on what I've looked through my swipe file. He normally uses this with a warm audience, right? Because there's nothing really saying who exactly he is. Then we have a simpler one here from Brian Moran, another the founder of Shopping Cart, where he just has a simple picture of himself presented by his name and then who he is and what he does. And of course at the bottom, if you have multiple people, you can just kind of do a bar where you have your feature area, and then you can have just a bar saying Brian Moran, founder of Get10,000fans.com. And what's important about this is whether you do that small little banner or you do something where Mike has done with, it's just the feature image is just him, you want the picture of you to be above the fold. So you want, it doesn't have to be big like his. It can be small like what you see in Brian's example, but what's most important is it's above the fold, so you don't have to scroll down per se to see who it is. So they should be able to see the headline and then immediately see a real person, and that will differentiate your page from the typical squeeze pages you see where there's just this headline and it's asking for your email, and visitors are in this particular instance, especially for a webinar, will be kind of turned off if they don't immediately know, like, oh, this is a live person, this is someone who's actually going to be presenting to me. And that's important even if the webinar is not going to be live. So we've done picture above the fold, the credibility banner, which is optional, and here I have So Frank Kern over here on, I'm just going to use the mouse because I forget left and right is different for you guys. So here we have what a credibility banner might look like, and that's just if you've been featured on certain things, you just name a couple of publications other people might have heard of, and that kind of instantly gives you credibility and lets them know, you're probably not a scammer. And then the last part is, this is normally done at the bottom of the page. You can see an example from Mike Dillard's, a different landing page from Mike Dillard's. Dillard's webinar funnel. I can't remember which one this was. If I did, I thought I was gonna finish that sentence with which one it was, because he's done a couple, but I can't remember which one this was for. But anyway, you'll have this definitely towards the bottom. This is gonna be the last thing that will be on the webinar page. Don't worry, we'll go over a full example. And it's just kind of a quick little tidbit of who you are. However, it's focused on the prospect. So I'm going to read Mike's, and then I'm going to go over why this is so kind of ninja what he does. So over the past 10 years, Mike Dillard has built 2 companies from scratch to more than 25 million in revenue each year. All right, so that's all about Mike. Today's training webinar will teach you how to build a large audience and email list from scratch. That's all about the prospect. That's about the prospect, not Mike. Using the same marketing strategy he used to build his 8-figure companies and an email list of over 400,000. This training session is for serious entrepreneurs only. So you notice what he did there is the first sentence was kind of a real power-packed, I've been doing this 10 years, I've made $25 million in sales. You go, wow, okay, well, you probably know what you're doing. And then it immediately ties that back into the webinar. It doesn't go on to say what else he did, what other accomplishments he had. It immediately went back to, and on the training today, you're gonna learn this, and this, and all this stuff is the same thing he did, he used to build his 2 8-figure businesses. So it's pretty subtle, but it's important to remember that even your bio section, I mean, this is only this is only 3 sentences, but more than 50% of it is actually about the prospect and building the benefits of the webinar. And he's just kind of weaved it in to his bio, which is definitely something you want to consider doing, because a lot of mistakes I see with landing pages and clients' landing pages, particularly with the webinar sign up, is they think the bio is supposed to be the opportunity to kind of talk about them and brag. Now, definitely, this is a brag sheet. Most of us haven't made $25 million, right? Or started multiple 8-figure companies, let alone have a 400,000 email list. We're all working on that, right? Eventually. But until then, you can use whatever, and obviously this is a marketing, but it could be the same in health and fitness or personal development or stress management. I guess that's also personal development, just coming up with random examples. But whatever you've accomplished, you can kind of throw that out there and then tie it into, these are the same strategies that you're going to learn on the webinar, and these strategies allowed me to do X, Y, Z. So hopefully that makes sense. The last part is you want to enroll the viewer. So at this point, they've most likely read the headline, they've seen your image, so they kind of know who you are. I went a little bit out of order in terms of the page, so they probably haven't read the bio yet. So they've gotten this far, they haven't bounced. So at this point, they have not bounced, right? So you've gotten rid of the 70 to 90% of people who just this isn't for at all. So now it's time to whittle it down further and make sure that you get real good prospects on your webinar. Again, because you don't just want anyone showing up to your webinar. If you just have anyone showing up to your webinar, you're gonna have terrible conversion metrics and you're gonna do a bunch of things that will actually wind up hurting your performance when you should just be fixing this page to make sure the right people are showing up to the webinar. So you want to include enticing details to build benefits and handle more objections. So it's just building on what you did, with the headline. And so there are just 2 basic examples here. It's just bullet points. 3 or 4 to 5 bullet points is good. I'll let you pause the video and read all these. I won't spend our time reading through each one of them. But essentially, you just want 4 to 5 bullet points that talk about more detail of what they might learn, not necessarily how. Remember, we're keeping the how for the webinar, because as soon as you start talking about how, you're gonna come up with more objections, and then you're gonna have to have more bullet points to handle the objections you just brought up in your previous bullet points because you said how, right? And you wanna keep that intrigue as well. All right, so that's enrolling the viewer. So let's go through a full page example of what this might look like. And of everything in my personal swipe file, Lewis Howes happens to be my favorite when it comes to designing landing pages, especially from cold traffic. And I know this particular one works because he's been using it for the past 3 months. So let's go through it. So at the top, he's got a picture of himself. So you immediately know this is a real person. This isn't some weird, random black hole page where someone's gonna enter their email and then get spammed with a bunch of offers they don't want. So you're putting a face and a name right up there. Then he's got his pre-tagline, free online training, just saying what it is, free online training. You can call it free webinar, free profit clinic, free weight loss clinic, free stress relieving seminar, whatever you want to call it. And then he's got master the secret weapon for growing your business and building the life of your dreams. So his headline is actually 100% benefit driven. He doesn't try and handle any objections. He just goes straight for, this is what you're going to learn. Then he includes the date and time of the webinar, claim your spot. It can be claim your spot, reserve your seat. And then of course the little text underneath that pretty much saying, hey, I'm not going to spam you or sell your email to the black market, right? Then next we have the next section with the bullet points. So these are where we're further enrolling people and we're pushing the wrong people away. So you want to focus just as much on enrolling the right people as pushing the right people away. Because remember, the point is to get good prospects to your webinar. The point is not to get as many people as you want. And I know I've said this 3 times, but I'm going to say it again. You want your ideal prospects, you want the good prospects, and when I say good prospects, I mean ones that are like willing, ready, and able to buy your products and services. So they're a good fit for whatever you're selling. You want those people to show up to the webinar. You don't want to waste anyone's time.
You don't want to waste anyone's time because number one, that's just kind of a little disingenuous. They're going to be upset. They might go rant on it on a post, and then you have some bad publicity. But mostly for selfish reasons, you want your webinar statistics to actually represent real stats. You don't want them to be skewed by people who shouldn't have been there in the first place. So that's your bullet points. Then he has another call to action, just claim my spot. And finally, he has his short bio further talking about the presenter. And I know it's small, but he follows kind of the same style that Mike Dillard does, where he talks a little bit about himself and then he goes right back into, this is what you're going to learn on the webinar. This is why it's so important. All right, so those are the three core elements of a high converting webinar landing page. So as a quick bonus, I wanted to quickly tell you about the two tools I like to use to build pretty much any kind of sales and landing pages. So if you're on WordPress, you already have a WordPress site, you're already kind of on there, you're cooking with gas, I would say OptimizePress is definitely the best solution. It's a drag and drop inference. It integrates with all types of membership plugins and all types of autoresponders, and of course, specifically in this case, webinar softwares. So it's an excellent solution for quickly building nice looking webinar registration pages. If you're looking for a hosted solution, and when I mean hosted solution, I mean there's zero coding. They host everything for you. They take care of the back end. You don't want to deal with WordPress for whatever reason, then ClickFunnels is definitely the way to go. And I just have a quick example here of one of the landing pages that we're currently split testing for a webinar we're doing. And this page was created in ClickFunnels, and looking at it, it probably took me like an hour to do using their drag and drop inference, and OptimizePress would have taken about the same. So definitely worth checking out OptimizePress or ClickFunnels to build your webinar registration landing page. So I hope you found that informative and actionable. Please go ahead and hit that like button if you got some value out of this, and then subscribe for more videos on getting more registrants to your webinar, getting more prospects and customers into your sales funnel, marketing your products and services online, and of course, growing your brand and authority. I'll see you in the next video.